Minister Aidan O'Riordan, the Minister of State for Equality, New Communities and Culture. And we just ask you to respond on what you've heard today in terms of bring about substantive equality for travellers.
Okay. Thanks. Do I have to sit down?
You can do what you want now.
Okay. Thanks very much for the welcome. I know some people in this room, so it's great to be a chance to talk about well, not just about traveller equality or traveller issues, but about equality in general. And you talked there about politics there a second ago. People like me have always run Ireland. People who look just like me. Male, white, settled community, Catholic background, able-bodied, heterosexual, middle class. People like me have always run Ireland. So why should somebody like me care about equality? Why should I care? Because Ireland has worked out just fine for me. Well, because I used to teach in a place called Sheriff Street in the inner city of Dublin. And I began to realise that if you're not as lucky as I am, that inequality and the feeling of inequality sucks itself into your bones at the earliest age, and you never really shake it. You never really shake it. And I don't want to live in a country where anybody feels unequal, because that makes me feel as if I'm not living in a country worth living in. So I was at a meeting there last week in Brussels, and the chap stood up and said he wants Italy to be the best place in the world for Italians. And I had to ask myself, is Ireland the best place in the world for all Irish people? And it's not. Right throughout our history, people have felt they've had to leave this country for a job, or because of their background, or because of their way of life. They felt that somewhere else would accept them more readily. And that's not the kind of country I think we have to build anymore. We have been through, and I don't have to tell anybody in this room, we have been through 6 of the most unbelievably difficult years in the history of this state. And today I was over in Renmore Barracks, and we're talking about the 1916 Rising and commemorating the 1916 Rising here in Galway, and Liam Mellows and Eamon Cant and all that great history you have here in Galway of all those people who fought for their rights and building a republic. And we're reflecting now in Ireland of what kind of country we have. And let's be honest with each other. Over the last 6 or 7 years, we have denuded what it's meant to be a human being. We've turned what it means to be a citizen into being a taxpayer. We've talked about living in an economy more than living in a society. And we've said that the great ambition for the Irish people, after all we've been through, is to re-enter the international bond markets and to be the greatest little country in the world to do business. Now, if that's all we've learned, then we've learned nothing. So I think we have to talk again about what it means to be a human being, what it means to live in this country, and what it actually means, and what is important about being an Irish person at this moment in time in our history. And why should anybody outside this room or outside the traveller community care about things like traveller accommodation, care about issues of education, care about issues like traveller ethnicity? Because we can, and I'm absolutely an advocate for traveller ethnicity. And I'm absolutely, and Bridget knows this, and other people in this room may know this, an absolute advocate for traveller ethnic rights. And if there's anything I achieve over the next 18 months in government, it's one of the things I want to achieve, is ethnic status for travellers. But it takes much more than achieving something like that, and a minister standing up in the door and saying it, and for it to be achieved. What you need is for the entirety of Irish society to understand why it's so important. And for people who look just like me, with my background, to say it's important for me as a non-traveller that we have ethnic rights for travellers. Because if you live in a society where everybody feels empowered, everybody feels involved, and everybody feels equal, that everybody benefits. Those children I taught, it's funny, they didn't believe that they were worth anything. And so I learned more from those children than I've ever learned from anybody else. You mightn't be surprised to hear that, seeing as I work in the Dáil. But you mentioned there about education. I mean, education education is so important. No matter what you go through in life, if you lose a job, if you get sick, if your relationship breaks down, if something awful happens in your life, the one thing that will always help you bounce back is education. But if you don't feel that education is for you, or reflects you as an individual, or reflects your cultural identity, then you're always going to feel locked out of it. So not only do we need, and the very start I said about, political representation from the traveller community, we need to start talking about having more teachers from the traveller community, having more guards from the traveller community, having the essential public services that people aspire to be in, those role model public services, more reflective of the communities that they serve and the communities that they teach. We have lots of problems in Ireland today, and we have lots of people who feel locked out, lots of people who feel as if they're not equal. The LGBT community, people, the asylum seekers, people living in direct provision centres, women who constantly have to struggle for their rights, even in the modern republic. But I think the point I would make is that, we have to now demand at this point in time that we are not going to be defined by monetary, economic values anymore. That there's something much bigger and much more profound that we have to fight for. And that if it only just comes down to taxation policy, and only just comes down to economic policy, and if we only ever say that somebody who's unemployed is a 20,000 cost to the exchequer, well then we're never going to get anywhere. We're never going to get anywhere. But it's convincing the totality of society that defending the rights of the minority benefits everybody, well then we might actually get somewhere. So I want to, if I can, to be for you to come with me on that and to help me on that. And I'd leave you just with this one story that Sue Conlon told me. I don't know if you know Sue Conlon. She's from the Irish Refugee Council. I'm doing a lot of work on direct provision at the moment. Direct provision centres are centres for asylum seekers up and down this land, and they're pretty difficult places to live in. And people live in them for a long period of time, and they get, again, dehumanised. But she said there was a protest recently at the direct provision centre. She didn't tell me where it was, but I think I know where it was. And it backs down to a halting site. And the traveller community there were wondering as to why this protest was taking place, and the people involved in the protest in the Direct Provision Centre said, we have been lived in appalling conditions for so long, and the state's not listening to us, and we want something better for our children, and that's why we're protesting. And the people living in the halting site said, we've been living in pretty poor conditions for a long time too, and the state's actually not listening to us either, and we want something better for our children. So they joined the protest. They joined the protest. And I thought for a second in my own mind, I bet these people thought they were having different fights. I bet these people thought they were in competition with each other. I bet these people thought that, no, we're worried about the asylum seeker rights after we worry about the traveller rights. They didn't. They knew they were part of the same conversation. So my point is, yes, we have to raise the level of this debate to being a general level about equality right across Irish society, and convince absolutely everybody of its need as a societal need, as an economic need, and as a Republican need as we look to the next 100 years after the commemorations of that period of time. Thanks very much for letting me speak uninterrupted. I'm not used to it, but I hope that benefits, gives you something as to what I believe in. But certainly, will you please, I've only got 18 months to achieve these things. I really need your help to achieve them. I'm going to have to need your back, but I'm pretty certain that I can achieve ethnic status for travellers. But that's the political battle won. It's convincing the hearts and minds of the ordinary Irish person as to the importance of it. That's the battle after that. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Minister. We won't worry about the hearts and minds, and we'll get the status. We'll be delighted with that. We can't be wasting our lives worrying about what's in the hearts and minds of every other human being, So we'll settle for the ethnic status. If you could knock that one out, we'd be more than delighted.